Well, I've covered Florida for the past 27 years and have never seen anything like the plan to dig a canal through Florida. It burned taxpayers and did lasting damage to our environment. And we're focusing on it tonight because we face striking new development in state government.
It's very devastating to realize what was there and what was lost.
It all started with a harebrained idea. Why not create a shortcut for large ships in the Gulf so they wouldn't have to curve around Florida to reach the Atlantic? Well, engineers said it would take a lot of work and did not make economic sense to cut a big hole through Florida, but they decided to try it anyway during the Great Depression to give people jobs, starting around Citrus County to Ocala, and they used hand tools and mules instead of readily available machines. Deliberately inefficient.
Yes, deliberately inefficient, deliberately designed to make sure that people have jobs, yes.
Digging 40 feet deep. Think about that. What happens when you go 40 feet deep?
You hit the Florida aquifer.
It would have flooded salt water into Florida's primary source of fresh drinking water. Tampa Bay area farmers raised alarms and helped suspend it.
Well, I think the most amazing part of that is that they didn't think about it.
But after scrapping the Cross Florida Ship Canal in the 1930s, the federal government revived it in the 1960s as the Cross Florida Barge Canal. They would go 12 feet deep instead of 40 feet deep to spare the aquifer.
It will utilize a series of locks, and the barges will be lifted up by these locks in a series of steps.
And they used what they called the crusher to blitz through forest about an acre per hour and to try to straighten out a river for a barge canal.
Moving of freight through by barge canals was out of date because the interstate highway system was largely constructed by then.
So in addition to the ecological and environmental damage, once again, it's a boondoggle. It's a waste of money. We're throwing money into a rat hole.
Well, reports of mounting environmental and ecological damage reached President Nixon, and he canceled it. But it had already inflicted a lot of damage, and one of Florida's most beautiful rivers took the hardest hit.
We're in a section of the river that would be similar to what the steamboats would have experienced. It was a narrow canopied channel, and it was usually most times of the year very clear water.
Yeah, the winding Awah River flowed north from the chain of lakes in central Florida to Silver Springs in the St. Johns River. It was a tourist paradise going back to the late 1800s. This canopied river was the crown jewel that drove Florida tourism before rockets and theme parks.
In the olden days, when they had steamboats on this river, they would come at night through these wonderful narrow channels, and they would light torches on the steamboats for the tourist. And so you could see the eyes of the alligators shining in the distance.
And this is what they dammed up near Palatka to build this reservoir to serve the ill-fated Barge Canal. Here's part of the river that continues to flow, and here's where they bottled it off for the canal, and here's where they cut off most of the natural flow to what used to be some of the most beautiful parts of the river. They also cut off the natural path of migration for a lot of fish.
Well, sturgeon, for example, they were in the river at one time too, but they're gone. We lost the striped bass altogether. The manatees have found it very difficult to get up and down the river.
And to this day, the dam blocks off migration of fish and manatees south, submerges natural springs, and restricts the Awah River.
Heartbreak, sadness, blocking the fish. It's I'm put it as a foot across her throat.
It's called Kirkpatrick Dam and is commonly known as Rodman Dam. And some do want to keep it in place, including people who own homes along the reservoir.
You've got a lot of people on that lake have valuable property. They built on that lake for a reason.
And those who want to keep the dam also say it's good for fishing, though that depends on who you ask and when you ask. Years ago, the dam kept a lot of fish in, but over time, it's also restricted, again, a natural path of migration in and out.
and then they all travel down through these systems into the natural springs to, you know, repopulate. But when you have these systems like this and these locks and these dams controlling the water, it controls everything else as well, which depletes the fishing population, and it just hurts everything on the ecosystem, really.
You're saying the fishing would be better without the dam?
Yes, I think it would.
And people who live south of the dam as you head toward the Tampa Bay and Orlando areas feel the effects.
You've got a lot of what I think is economic development that's tied up in having the dam there by those that like to guide fishing and other things. The con is that that's not the natural state of the river, and there are a lot of properties downriver that would like to have the natural flow restored.
And the dam is aging. The Army Corps of Engineers National Inventory classifies it as a high hazard potential dam. That means if it fails, it carries the potential for significant damage and probable loss of human life.
And we have to decide whether or not we're going to take a proactive stance to return the Awah back to its original form or replace the dam and keep it as it is now.
And that brings us to the big development at the state capitol. The legislature approved more than $6.2 million to plan the removal of the dam and the restoration of the Awah River. And that may finally bring this long-running story to a close. Or not. After President Nixon stopped the Barge Canal, the federal government has favored removing the dam, and every Florida governor has also supported removing it until Governor Rick Scott, who took no public stance, and Governor Ron DeSantis, who has also taken no public stance. But he will soon either go along with funding this plan to restore the river or veto it. And he did veto funding for an updated study of the dam and the river last year. His position on this dam and this river at this point are unclear.
We met with his chief of staff, we met with his head attorney, some other staff people. They all were shaking their head, yeah, it makes sense to do this.
And what did they do after that?
And that's where the screen goes dark. Nothing.
If you want to learn more about the canal fiasco and the debate over the dam, University of Florida professor Dr. Stephen Knoll wrote a book about it called Ditch of Dreams. And we produced a documentary called Florida's Boondoggle. You'll find it on the Fox Local app under Special Presentations. Florida's Boondoggle takes an in-depth look at the history as we'll continue to follow the story as it advances through the world of money, power, and politics.